The Zelkan Empire had been fighting the Morveth Collective for over 3 decades when the first human ships appeared at the edge of the galaxy. Captain Thexra of the Zelkan Third Fleet barely noticed the scanner readings at first. 3 small vessels, primitive by galactic standards, drifting slowly through the Outer Rim territories where no civilized species dared venture anymore. The war had consumed everything. What began as a territorial dispute over mining rights to the rich Omega sector had escalated into total galactic warfare. The Zelkans, with their crystalline exoskeletons and precise military doctrine, controlled the northern spiral arms. The Morveth, shape-shifting creatures of pure energy housed in mechanical bodies, dominated the southern regions. Between them lay a wasteland of dead worlds and floating debris that had once been thriving colonies. Commander Vextal stood on the bridge of the battleship Crimson Dawn, studying the tactical displays that showed the current front lines. Red markers indicated Zelkan positions, blue showed Morveth forces, and the vast gray areas between them represented the neutral zones where nothing lived anymore. The numbers were staggering. Over 40 billion casualties, 700 worlds rendered uninhabitable, entire star systems evacuated. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from those unknown vessels," reported Communications Officer Nyla. Her voice carried the same weary tone that had infected everyone after years of endless conflict. Thexra's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Pirates, most likely. Or scavengers picking through the debris fields. Ignore them and focus on the Morveth movement near Sector 7. But Nyla persisted. "Sir, they're transmitting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The message is unusual." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of one of the strange ships. The being that appeared was unlike anything in the galactic database. Bipedal, with pale skin stretched over a frame that seemed both fragile and sturdy. Its face was covered in short fur around the mouth area, and its eyes held an intensity that made even battle-hardened Zelkan warriors uncomfortable. "This is Admiral Saracen of the United Earth Federation," the creature said, its voice carrying through the universal translator with surprising clarity. "We represent humanity, and we've been observing your conflict for the past 6 months. We're here to offer our assistance in ending this war." The bridge fell silent. Thexra's compound eyes widened as he processed what he'd heard. Did that primitive just offer to help us end a war that has consumed the galaxy for 30 years? The human continued speaking, apparently unaware of the shock her words had caused. "We understand you've been fighting over resource allocation and territorial boundaries. Our analysis indicates that both sides have fought to a strategic stalemate, with neither able to achieve victory without mutual destruction. We believe there's a solution that benefits everyone." Vextal leaned forward, his crystalline armor catching the light from the displays. "This is either the greatest joke in galactic history, or these humans are completely insane. They have 3 ships against fleets that number in the millions." On the Morveth side of the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Overlord Kethamor, a being of pure energy crackling within a massive mechanical shell, received the same transmission aboard his flagship, Void Render. His energy form pulsed with what might have been amusement or rage. With Morveth, it was often difficult to tell the difference. "These humans believe they can end what we could not." His voice resonated through the ship's communication systems like rolling thunder. "They speak of solutions as if this war is merely a mathematical problem to be solved." His tactical advisor, Zephniel, interfaced directly with the ship's data networks. "Their vessels show no significant weapon systems, Overlord. Energy signatures are minimal. They appear to rely on some form of chemical propulsion that our ancestors abandoned millennia ago." The war had its own momentum now, fed by hatred that ran generations deep. Zelkan children were taught from hatching that Morveth were parasites seeking to drain the life force from the galaxy. Morveth youth learned that Zelkins were rigid oppressors who would cage all free-thinking beings in crystal prisons. The original dispute over mining rights had been forgotten, buried under mountains of propaganda and decades of atrocities committed by both sides. Admiral Chen's next transmission went out to both fleets simultaneously. We've studied your history, your cultures, your technologies. This war began over resource scarcity. But the galaxy is vast enough for both your species to thrive. The Omega sector you're fighting over contains enough rare minerals to supply both civilizations for 1,000 years if properly managed. Captain Thexera found himself intrigued despite his skepticism. These humans speak as if they've solved resource management on a galactic scale. What could a species with such primitive technology possibly teach us? The human admirals seemed to anticipate this question. We know what you're thinking. Our ships may seem primitive to you, but we've learned something in our brief existence that your species apparently haven't: how to fight efficiently. Your war has dragged on for decades because you're fighting it the wrong way. Across the communication channels, Zelkan and Morveth commanders exchanged glances with their subordinates. The audacity was breathtaking. A species that had only recently developed faster-than-light travel was lecturing civilizations that had mastered the stars for thousands of years. Admiral Chen continued, her tone becoming more serious. We're going to end this war within 72 hours. You can choose to participate in the solution, or you can be swept aside by it. But the killing stops now. The transmission ended, leaving both fleets in stunned silence. On 100 ships across 2 vast armadas, military commanders tried to process what they had just heard. Some laughed, others raged, but a few began to wonder what these strange new beings might actually be capable of. In the neutral zone between the fleets, the 3 human ships continued their slow approach. They seemed insignificant against the backdrop of massive dreadnoughts and planet-killer weapons, like insects approaching sleeping giants. But something about their steady, purposeful movement suggested they were far from helpless. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when these seemingly primitive newcomers tried to accomplish what 2 advanced civilizations could not. None of them realized that they were about to witness the most decisive military action in galactic history, carried out by a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to end conflicts quickly and permanently. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 30 years was about to meet humanity's gift for controlled violence and strategic thinking, and in 72 hours, everything would change. The Strategic Assessment Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the cramped command center of the UEF ship Determination, studying holographic displays that showed the complete tactical situation. Her small fleet consisted of only 3 vessels: the Determination, Resolution, and Defiance, each carrying a crew of less than 200. Against them were arrayed the combined might of 2 galactic empires, over 4 million warships, weapons capable of cracking planets, and technologies that humanity was still centuries away from developing. Admiral, we're receiving thousands of communications from both fleets, reported Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, her fingers dancing across control interfaces that looked primitive compared to the alien technology surrounding them. Demands for surrender, threats, requests for clarification, and a few that seemed genuinely curious about our intentions. Chen nodded, her expression calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Any response from the fleet commanders themselves? Captain Thexera of the Zelkan 3rd Fleet has requested a formal meeting. Overlord Kethamor of the Morveth has issued what the translator calls a challenge of verification. Apparently, their way of asking us to prove we're not completely insane. Through the observation windows, the distant lights of the 2 massive fleets were visible as they maintained their hostile positions across several star systems. Chen had spent months studying this conflict, analyzing battle reports, intercepting communications, and learning everything possible about both species. What she had discovered was a war that had lost all strategic purpose, sustained only by momentum and hatred. "Dr. Peterson, what's your assessment of their command structures?" Chen asked the expedition's xenopsychologist, a thin man whose specialty was understanding alien military thinking. Dr. James Peterson consulted his tablet, which displayed psychological profiles of key commanders from both sides. The Zelkans operate on a rigid hierarchy based on proven tactical achievement. They respect strength and decisive action, but they've become trapped in a defensive mindset after decades of stalemate. The Morveth function more like a collective consciousness, with individual leaders emerging based on situational needs. They're more adaptable, but also more prone to confusion when faced with unexpected variables. Chen turned to Colonel Marcus Webb, the expedition's military strategist. "Analysis of their tactical doctrine?" Webb's weathered face showed the expression of a soldier who had spent his career studying warfare in all its forms. "Both sides are fighting like it's still the early 21st century, Admiral. Massive formations, predictable maneuvers, extended supply lines stretched across dozens of systems. They've got superior firepower and technology, but they're using them inefficiently." "Elaborate." "They're fighting a war of attrition when they should be fighting for decisive objectives. Look at this." Webb activated a display showing troop movements over the past year. The Zelkans control superior defensive positions, but they waste resources on meaningless border skirmishes. The Morveth have better mobility and adaptability, but they scatter their forces across too many fronts. Neither side is concentrating their strength where it would actually matter. Chen studied the tactical displays, her mind processing information with the efficiency that had made her the youngest admiral in Earth fleet history. They're both making the same fundamental mistake. They're fighting the war they want to fight instead of the war that exists. The human strategy was based on principles that Earth's military had learned through centuries of bitter experience. Concentrate force at the decisive point. Strike at the enemy's center of gravity. Achieve your objectives quickly and withdraw before the enemy can respond. Most importantly, always remember that the goal of war is to achieve political objectives, not to inflict maximum casualties. Lieutenant Santos, open a channel to both fleet commanders simultaneously. It's time for the demonstration. The main display split to show Captain Thexra on one side and Overlord Kethmore on the other. The Zelkan officer's crystalline features reflected his skepticism, while the Morveth's energy form crackled with what might have been impatience. "Gentlemen," Chen began, "you've been fighting over the Omega Sector for 30 years. Your conflict has cost billions of lives and rendered hundreds of worlds uninhabitable. You continue fighting because neither side can achieve victory without destroying what you're fighting for. I'm here to show you a different way." Thexra's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Human, your species has existed in space for what, 50 of your years? How could you possibly understand the complexities of this conflict?" Overlord Kethmore's mechanical form shifted, energy crackling between the joints. "Your vessels carry no weapons capable of threatening even a single ship in our fleets. What demonstration could you possibly offer?" Chen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and predatory. "Colonel Webb, please show our new friends the sensor readings from the Kepler system." The display changed to show detailed scans of a star system located several light-years away. Where there should have been 8 planets, only debris fields remained. The energy signatures indicated that the destruction had been recent, within the past 6 months. The Kepler system was controlled by a species called the Vorthak, Chen explained. They had been raiding human shipping for 2 years, taking our people as slaves and our cargo as tribute. When diplomacy failed, we ended the threat. Both alien commanders stared at the readings in disbelief. Captain Thexra was the first to speak. "You destroyed an entire star system? That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would drain the output of 100 suns. We didn't destroy it, Chen replied calmly. We removed it from the strategic equation. There's a difference. Overlord Kethmore's form flickered with what might have been fear. Show us how. Chen gestured to Colonel Webb, who activated another display. This one showed the approach vectors and timing of the human attack on the Vorthak system. 3 small ships, moving with precision through the outer planets toward specific targets. The Vorthak made the same mistake you're both making, Webb explained. They assumed that superior firepower was the key to victory. They concentrated their defenses around their most heavily armed installations, while leaving their critical infrastructure relatively unprotected. The display showed the human ships bypassing the Vorthak fleet entirely, instead targeting orbital manufacturing stations, supply depots, and communication relays. Within 6 hours, the Vorthak industrial capacity had been eliminated. Without supplies or coordination, their mighty fleet became a collection of isolated ships with no strategic purpose. We didn't need to destroy their fleet, Chen continued. We made it irrelevant. When an enemy can't supply, coordinate, or reinforce their forces, they cease to be a military threat, regardless of how many ships they have. The silence that followed was profound. Both commanders were military professionals with decades of experience, and they could see the elegance of the human approach. Instead of matching force with force, the humans had struck at the foundations that made force possible. Captain Thexra was the first to recover. You're proposing to do the same to us, attack our supply lines and manufacturing facilities? No, Chen replied. We're proposing to show you how to end this war by attacking the real enemy, the inefficiency and waste that keeps you fighting over scraps when abundance is possible. She activated a new display showing resource distribution throughout the galaxy. The Omega sector, over which both sides had been fighting, was highlighted in red. Surrounding it, dozens of other systems glowed with similar signatures. Your war isn't about resources, Chen explained. It's about distribution and efficiency. The galaxy contains enough raw materials to supply both your civilizations for millennia, but you've been so focused on fighting each other that you've ignored better solutions. Dr. Peterson stepped forward. Our analysis indicates that cooperation between your species could increase resource extraction efficiency by over 3,000%. You're not competing for scarce resources. You're fighting over the least efficient way to obtain abundant ones. Overlord Kethmore's energy form pulsed rapidly. You speak of cooperation as if 3 decades of warfare could be simply forgotten. Chen's expression grew serious. They can't be forgotten, but they can be made irrelevant by creating a future where continued fighting serves no purpose. We're going to show you how to do that. The transmission ended, leaving both alien commanders to contemplate what they had heard. In the space between the fleets, the 3 human ships continued their approach, carrying with them the promise of a solution that neither side had thought possible. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or firepower, but the ability to see past the immediate problem to the underlying solution. For the resolution, the transformation began at 0800 Galactic Standard Time on the 3rd day since humanity's arrival. Admiral Chen's promise to end the war within 72 hours had seemed impossible, but as the deadline approached, both the Zelkan and Morveth fleets found themselves witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Captain Thexra watched from his bridge as the 3 human ships took positions at precise points between the 2 massive fleets. They moved with a confidence that seemed absurd, given their size and apparent weaponry. But something about their positioning suggested a plan that went far beyond simple bravado. Admiral Chen to all ships, came the transmission that would be remembered for generations. In 12 minutes, this war ends. Both fleets will stand down and begin immediate withdrawal to designated coordinates. Any ship that fires after the deadline will be considered a hostile actor and dealt with accordingly. Overlord Kethmore's mechanical form shifted restlessly aboard his flagship. Human, your arrogance knows no bounds. You have 3 ships against millions. How exactly do you propose to enforce this deadline? Chen's reply came with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. By demonstrating that continuing to fight serves no one's interests. Colonel Webb, initiate Operation Clean Slate. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The human ships didn't attack either fleet directly. Instead, they launched a series of small objects that accelerated rapidly toward specific coordinates throughout both star systems. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense, but rather advanced devices that began emitting powerful signals across all communication frequencies. The first effect was immediate. Every ship in both fleets suddenly found their tactical displays updating with information they had never possessed before. Detailed resource surveys of star systems throughout the galaxy, showing mineral deposits and energy sources that dwarfed anything either side had been fighting over. Manufacturing techniques that could increase production efficiency by orders of magnitude, agricultural methods that could turn barren worlds into garden planets within decades. This is our gift to both your civilizations, Chen announced as the data flowed across thousands of ships. Complete surveys of every system within 50 light years, along with the technology to exploit them efficiently. The Omega sector you've been fighting over contains perhaps 1% of the resources available to you if you simply look beyond your immediate borders. Captain Thexra stared at the incoming data streams in amazement. His species had been fighting over mining rights to a few asteroid fields while ignoring entire systems rich with materials they had never thought to look for. The information was detailed, accurate, and offered in freely accessible formats that both civilizations could use immediately. But the humans weren't finished. The second wave of devices activated what Dr. Peterson had called the Perspective Protocol. Throughout both fleets, holographic displays began showing a time-lapse view of the galaxy over the past 30 years. The progression of the war was visible as spreading zones of destruction, but more importantly, so were the missed opportunities. While the Zelkons and Morveth had been destroying each other's colonies, dozens of systems had remained unexplored. Worlds that could have housed billions of beings had been left empty. Technologies that could have advanced both civilizations had remained undeveloped because all resources were devoted to warfare. Your war has cost you more than lives, Chen's voice continued. It has cost you the future you could have built. Every ship you've lost, every world you've abandoned, every generation raised to know only conflict, all of it was unnecessary. The displays showed alternative timelines where cooperation had replaced warfare. The combined scientific capabilities of both species could have unlocked technologies that individual research had missed. Zelkan precision engineering paired with Morveth energy manipulation could have created wonders beyond either civilization's current imagination. Overlord Kethmore's energy form flickered with what his crew recognized as deep contemplation. These projections, they are based on our actual capabilities. Every calculation is derived from your own scientific databases, Dr. Peterson replied. We're not offering you fantasy scenarios. We're showing you what becomes possible when conflict is replaced by coordination. The third and final phase of the human demonstration was the most dramatic. Colonel Webb activated a series of gravitational manipulators that had been positioned throughout the contested zone. In a display of precision engineering that left both fleets speechless, the devices began moving asteroids and debris from the 3 decades of warfare. The wreckage of thousands of ships, the remains of destroyed stations, the countless pieces of military hardware that littered the space between the fleets. All of it began moving with purposeful direction toward specific coordinates. Within an hour, the floating monuments to 30 years of destruction had been consolidated into neat formations. This debris contains enough refined metals to build 1,000 new colonies, Chen announced. Rather than leave it as a memorial to your conflict, we suggest you use it as the foundation for your cooperation. The psychological effect was profound. Seeing the physical remnants of their war organized into useful resources drove home the magnitude of what had been wasted. Both sides had been fighting over scraps while standing in a junkyard of abundance. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when the humans revealed their final surprise. Hidden among the debris fields had been emergency beacon transmissions, distress calls from ships of both sides that had been broadcasting for years from remote locations where their crews had survived after being presumed dead. There are over 12,000 of your people still alive in scattered locations throughout this region, Chen reported. Zelkan and Morveth survivors who have been helping each other survive while your fleets continued fighting. If they can find common ground, perhaps their leaders can as well. The silence that followed was broken by Captain Thexra. You knew about our missing crews and said nothing until now? We needed you to understand the broader picture first, Chen replied. Saving individual lives means nothing if the war continues to create new casualties. But now that you see the alternatives available to you, those lives become the foundation for something better. The deadline passed without a shot being fired. Across both fleets, commanders found themselves staring at displays full of data that made continued fighting seem not just wasteful, but genuinely insane. The humans had demonstrated something that neither side had considered possible, that the galaxy was vast enough for everyone to prosper if they approached the problem intelligently. Over the following hours, formal communications began between Zelkan and Morveth commanders for the first time in decades. The discussions were tentative at first, but the data provided by the humans offered concrete talking points that went beyond ideology and grievance. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Determination as the two massive fleets began their withdrawal to different systems. The movement was careful and coordinated, with both sides adhering to safety protocols that prevented any possibility of accidental engagement. Admiral, Lieutenant Santos reported, we're receiving formal communications from both fleet commanders. Captain Thexra is requesting detailed information about resource extraction techniques. Overlord Kethmore wants to discuss joint research initiatives. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Dr. Peterson, what's your assessment of long-term stability? The psychological framework is sound, Peterson replied. Both sides now understand that their real enemy was scarcity thinking, not each other. Given the abundance of alternatives we've shown them, there's no logical reason to resume fighting. Colonel Webb added, more importantly, they've seen what focused military action can accomplish when it's applied intelligently. Neither side will want to face an opponent who can end decades of fighting in 72 hours. As the human ships prepared to leave the system, Chen authorized one final transmission to both fleets. This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Federation. The war between your civilizations is now concluded. You have the tools and information needed to build a prosperous future for both your species. Use them wisely. The response came simultaneously from both fleet commanders, their voices carrying a respect that had been earned through demonstration rather than force. Admiral Chen, Captain Thexra transmitted, the Zelkan Empire formally requests diplomatic relations with your Federation. We have much to learn from your people. Overlord Kethmore's message followed immediately. The Morveth Collective extends gratitude to humanity. Your perspective has opened possibilities we had not considered. As the three human ships accelerated toward the edge of the system, they left behind a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed. The war that had consumed two civilizations for 30 years had been ended not through superior firepower, but through the application of strategic thinking and a willingness to see beyond the immediate problem to the underlying solution. In the months that followed, the Zelkan-Morveth Accords would be signed, establishing the framework for cooperation that would transform both civilizations. The joint resource extraction projects would exceed every projection, leading to a golden age of prosperity and exploration. The rescued survivors would become symbols of the cooperation possible between former enemies. And throughout the galaxy, the story would spread of how humanity had accomplished in 3 days what 2 advanced civilizations could not achieve in 3 decades. Not through force, but through the simple recognition that most conflicts exist only because the participants haven't imagined better alternatives. The war was over, the future had begun,